Thank you. We have Senator McDonald online in Queensland.
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Now,
We should have there he is.
no, that's not Senator
No,
McDonald.
that's our colleague.
Oh, I was going to say, if that's Senator McDonald, she's certainly changed from when I last saw her. Okay, it's all right, Senator McDonald. We have Mr. Brett Hughes on the TV there. So anyway, we'll do this properly. I now welcome representatives from Engineers Australia, including Mr. Brett Hughes via video conference. So for the Hansard record, if you please could give your name and the capacity in which you appear today.
My name is Sabella Grady. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor at Engineers Australia.
Thank you.
My name is Scott Ellerant. I'm the South Australian Chair of the Transport Australia Society, and I'm the Policy Convener on the National Committee.
Thanks very much. Mr. Hughes, I'm looking at
My
you.
name is Brett Hughes. My name is Brett Hughes. I'm a member of the Transport Australia Society and Chair of the Working Group on Road Safety.
Tremendous. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give you the opportunity to make an opening statement before Senator McDonald and I go to questions, and I'll give Senator McDonald the call first. So, please.
Thank you very much for having us here today and giving us the opportunity to contribute to this valuable work. As you know, Engineers Australia is the peak body for the engineering profession. We have over 100,000 members, individual members. We're constituted by a Royal Charter to advance the science and practice of engineering for the benefit of the community. This submission was developed by members of Engineers Australia's Transport Australia Society. We call it TAS. TAS is an Engineers Australia technical society for transport professionals in Australia and focuses on key transport decision and policy making affecting the wellbeing, productivity and sustainability of our cities and regions, and to inform public debate and decision making. Our submission focused primarily on safety and upon economic reform. Shall I introduce my colleagues again?
You can, Ms. Grady, the floor is yours. You're
a little bit more information about my esteemed colleagues.
You are the boss. Do what you want.
So I have the good fortune of having with me two technical experts to answer all your technical questions. And Dr. Scott Ellerant is the Deputy Chair of Transport Australia Society, and online Dr. Brett Hughes, Chair of the Transport Australia Society Working Group on Road Safety. Scott is an engineer economist with 35 years experience as a chartered engineer. The first half of his career was spent working as a traffic engineer for Queensland Transport and Main Roads, and he spent the last 19 years as a consultant transport planner. Scott was part of a team that reviewed road safety and speed management for the South Australian Government in 2019 and 2020, and Scott will be speaking primarily on the economic reform components of our submission today.
Right.
And Dr. Hughes, Brett Hughes is an engineer with 40 years experience in land transport policy and planning. He was the lead author of our Transport Australia discussion paper, which I have here. If you would like me to leave a copy with you, I can also send that digitally because you haven't seen it yet.
Right.
Brett will be speaking today on matters pertaining to road safety. And I do have a whole lot of other notes, but I'm conscious that we've only got half an hour.
Senator McDonald will speak for herself. I'm keen to hear you.
Okay.
I am keen for Engineers Australia to get everything on the record. And don't worry about the time for questions. It's more important you tell us, because I'm sitting here with that glazed look on my face, ready to learn everything I can.
Perfect.
So fire away.
Fantastic. Well, despite the significant changes due to COVID-19 and the associated restrictions, the key themes of our submission are still relevant. Australia was a world leader in road safety from the 1970s through to the 1990s. In 2004, Australia adopted the Safe System approach to road safety, meant to be like the Swedish Vision Zero philosophy, which achieved world-leading road safety outcomes in that country. Whilst the theory and intention of Safe System was sound, in practice Australia has not achieved the intended road safety outcomes over the subsequent decade. As of 2016, Australia's per capita rate of road crash deaths has slipped back to be level with the OECD median and has plateaued since. The 2020 target for fatal road crash reduction was not achieved, and in general, countries that have led in terms of improving road safety have failed to continue their downward trend. We're sure that committee has read our recommendations. However, I would like to elaborate on several points. Australian road funding is primarily allocated to road congestion relief. not road safety improvements,
Yep.
even though road crashes cost the Australian economy almost twice as much as road congestion. And that's not even looking at the associated trauma and mental health that is associated with road fatalities and so on. Road funding focused on urban road capacity improvements and does not address the quality and condition of rural roads where the most fatal crashes occur. Road transport does not operate well economically in terms of funding, investment, charging and pricing. It's a very flawed system where funding is not applied to achieve best value for investment, such as for maintenance. The charges for road use don't reflect the full costs of use, which depend on the type of road, the road use and the time of day.
Sorry, Ms. Grady, may I just clarify something? So you're saying that the money, taxes that are collected from the road transport industry aren't enough to maintain the roads? Is that what you said? I just want to get that clear, what that point
Perhaps
was.
not adequately allocated, but I can see...
Not adequately allocated, right.
Yeah, we're not saying we're not spending enough, but we question the distribution of the spend.
Oh, no, I'm quite happy there. You've clarified that for me because we reckon we get charged way too much and it doesn't come back. Yeah, that's right. Sorry. I did interrupt, but let's clarify.
That's all right.
Thank you.
I'm quite happy for you to interrupt at any point because I'm just elaborating and then I have my fantastic...
We're pretty
technical
interactive in
witnesses
this
here.
committee, so
Perfect.
please keep going.
Love it. Okay. We note that roads are the only infrastructure that do not have independent economic oversight or an independent safety regulator and recommend that both be investigated to improve transparency and accountability. Road policy is backward-looking and isn't taking account of the changes in demand, transport and logistics, new technologies, new business models, or the social and physical environments, including climate change. And such changes are likely to significantly change freight and passenger supply and demand, but currently seem to be ignored in transport policy and planning.
Yeah.
Engineering standards for roads, particularly for safety, need to be urgently reviewed and modernised. Government road safety policy has changed little in practice over the last 80 years and continues to rely almost entirely on road engineering, driver education and enforcement. Low-cost options to improve rural road safety, such as wire rope barriers, have not been implemented systematically. Australia's approach to safe vehicles has shied away from regulation, meaning we permit vehicles with measurably inferior safety outcomes, 2, 3, 4 star cars, to be used for work. This is questionable given employers' duty of care to provide a safe workplace. We haven't made road safety law as Vision Zero was, meaning implementation is often compromised when funding is scarce. Skills for all participants in road transport need to be substantially improved. As qualified professionals, engineers need to take a greater role in the formal approval of road plans, designs and construction. Despite being workplaces under occupational safety law, roads have almost entirely been ignored as workplaces.
Absolutely, that's right.
Regulators and businesses in general need to ensure the safety of employees and other road users in transport. This is particularly important for road workers and for general passenger vehicle travel. All of this suggests road safety remains an aspirational goal rather than a part of business as usual. Thank you for the invitation to appear. Brett and Scott will respond to any technical questions you may have.
So, thank you, Ms. Grady. Ms. Ellerin.
So as Sibylla said, we're not necessarily saying the budget for roads needs to be massively increased tomorrow. On OECD figures of the countries that report, and the last figures I saw, Australia actually had the highest percentage of GDP spent on transport infrastructure of all the countries that reported. We were the highest. But on maintenance, we were the lowest. And so, and when you then consider that particularly in the last decade, where we've had a lot of urban growth and a lot of pressure to do road projects in particularly out of urban areas, and these projects soak up a lot of the budget, arguably the budgets to actually maintain or improve the condition of rural roads, which is where 3/4 of the fatalities occur, have if anything, shrunk. And so we'd like to see that balance redressed. So we think there's even when you compare to other countries which are similar in terms of population density, like Canada, we think we just don't spend enough on maintenance. And it's concerning that in a both politically and economically pressured environment, as long as all of the money is just in one bucket competing with each other, the projects in the areas with the most people pressure in a democracy will always win. But in safety terms, that's not always the best answer.
Yeah.
And so we'd like to see really a program, a systematic program, or a separate bucket of money, if you will, for safety improvements to make sure they're done systematically. So Sweden, for example, starting in about 1997, so it's almost 25 years ago now, they started putting up more safety barriers on all their rural highways. They only spent only a few hundred million per year, but in the scheme of the billions we spent on roads, it wasn't a huge amount. But over 25 years, by 2025, they'll have pretty much their entire rural highway system treated. So they've got median barriers. They're very successful. In these sections of road that are treated, they've dropped fatal crash rates 80%, 75, 80%. So there's a large drop, so it's measurably safer. It's far cheaper than four-laning, which realistically, given budgets, we'll never four-lane the whole Bruce Highway or the whole Air Highway in the lifetime of anyone in this room. So if we're realistic about aiming to achieve lower rates, we have to systematically plan out what is a program that's affordable within the current resources without assuming it's going to massively increase.
So you're saying run the barriers where the double white line is?
Correct. It needs to widen the road slightly.
And widen, I get that.
But it's much cheaper than a four-laning scheme. And you could build 20 kilometres of that for a four-laning 1 kilometre. And so you can see that for things like, how do you four-lane the whole Pacific Highway or the whole Hume Highway? That's how the Swedes have got ahead of us. So now they're down to the point where their fatal crash rate's about 2/3 of ours per capita, and they do a similar amount of driving. So the average kilometres driven per car per year in Sweden is similar to here. So it's quite a good comparator. It's not as low density as as high density as some of the other European countries. So as we said, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we were, if not top, certainly in the top performers in road safety. We were one of the first countries to introduce random breath testing, roadside breath testing, seatbelts. Yep. And we were in the top half dozen for that whole period. But as Sibylla said, we're now down to about midfield. So we're not terrible, still better than the United States, but we're not where we were. And we think we need to make systematic changes to the way we spend the money so that there's a definable bucket of money targeted at safety improvements.
Can I just come in there, Mr. Eller? Do you have this opportunity to sit with the relevant ministers and have these discussions?
I can't answer that.
Well, I'm just saying that because Miss Grady, you came with a baseball bat. I'm going to point you to Minister McCormack's office because you're on fire. I love what you're saying, but I think it's a fair question.
I have had the opportunity to meet with Minister McCormack in the past. However, it was on a different matter.
Oh, okay.
But I will seek to. We are doing a suite of policy documents that we're going to try and do some campaigns around, engage with ministers.
Our paper was written in 2019 or the end of 2019, and I guess with COVID, it's really been a mess.
Sure. And I just raised that because you see, I'm a stickler for thinking that. I'm a stickler for believing, that if governments and bureaucrats actually meet with the people that know what they're talking about, we can get some good outcomes in this nation. We really can. Sorry, Mr. Ellerin, you were talking. I interrupted you.
Can I also say,
yes.
Senator? Yes. After we wrote the discussion paper on road safety, and the Institution of Engineers and TAS has several discussion papers. We distributed that discussion paper to all of the members of the Transport and Infrastructure Council, and we offered to meet with all of those ministers or their policy officers. A few of those responded positively to that, and we did. A few of those sent them off to other interested ministers, like the police minister instead of the transport minister or the roads minister. So we've actively engaged with ministers and have had some response, but we haven't been able to discuss with all of the ministers in all of the jurisdictions.
Okay, and the reason why I want to follow on that too is that I applaud, and I always give credit where credit's due, and I applaud the government now, and I remember when I took to the ALP National Conference back in 2019, some road safety initiatives, and one was reintroducing the Office of Road Safety. Well, the government has copied that. That's good, and we'll see what work that does because we need to collect the data. I also applaud that this government actually has a dedicated Assistant Minister for Road Safety and tied up with freight transport, and I think that is good too. And I just want to see now, where do we follow up? What's the follow-up? And let's hope it's not just announcements, we're actually going to do something. That's why I'm asking, has there been a reach out? Have we sat down with the people that build the roads? And predominantly, and look, Senator McDonald can comment, and she's a girl from the bush. We know how bad these roads are. We also know how many kilometres, how many thousands and thousands of kilometres of road there are. But if we can spend the money better, it'd be great to hear how we can do that. And at the same time, we still manage to kill 1,200 Australians a year and injure and maim another 30,000. So sorry, keep going, Mr. Hughes or Mr. Ellerin.
Brett, do you want to say that?
Yes, can I just comment on that? The last few years, the last 2 years at the moment, we have your committee inquiring into road safety and a number of other matters in road transport, which is terribly important. We've had a joint select committee on road safety. We've got a draft new national road safety strategy. We've got a draft heavy vehicle safety strategy. Most of those inquiries are asking the same people and getting the same answers, and we keep doing the same things. And we've been doing the same things in road safety for the last 80 years. About 95% of all road safety strategies around the world rely on driver education, driver enforcement, and road engineering. Now, if we look at other safety domains like offshore petroleum, mining, occupational safety, industrial safety, and we ask them, how would you do road safety if you adopted your principles and practices? And they'd say, well, we wouldn't do it anything like that. We keep on doing the same things that we've been doing in the past. Instead of doing those things and doing them well, we can do the things that we've been doing in the past well and better, but we also need to adopt some other learnings from other domains, which is what the Institution of Engineers discussion papers have proposed to the ministers.
Well, that says it all, doesn't it? So okay, Mr. Ellerin, do you want to keep going? No, please do.
Okay, well,
It's your opportunity.
All right, well, some of the specific things we mentioned in the discussion paper. So as Brett said, you've got safe roads, safe vehicles, safe drivers and safe speeds. The speed, obviously, and the drivers relate to enforcement. They're probably the two things we've done the most in the time of the National Road Safety Strategy in the last 10 years. If you're a cynic, realistically, they're the two that you can do the most cheaply. And in fact, in the study we did for South Australia last year, the rate of enforcement of expiation issuing in South Australia is comparable to Sweden. So the world's best practice people aren't finding people any more than we are already. Therefore, while we're not saying you should let people off if they're doing dangerous behaviours, it's hard to think there's a lot of room for improvement in more effort there. So we need to look at the way we do things. So in things like speed cameras, they have a lot more point-to-point cameras, as you see in some in New South Wales, where instead of just having a guy with a radar gun at the bottom of the hill, you have two sites a measured distance apart, your time between them, and if your average speed is over, then you're booked. And the thing is, it's not just a question of which creates more revenue, they get better results, they change behaviour more. Because everyone knows if you beat the time, you will be done. It's unavoidable. They actually get better acceptance from the public because you can't say, I was just drifting a bit over downhill when your speed is over the average for the entire link. It's undeniable. So they're more effective at changing attitudes of people. And so the things that the way we do enforcement would benefit from change. We mentioned before already the safe roads, that there are lower cost treatments we should roll out on longer lengths of rural road, which I think are very important. Other things such as the audible edge lines. You need an adequate road shoulder, so the road maintenance is still critical, because if you haven't maintained that road adequately, some of those things aren't even possible. But given adequate road maintenance, that makes those low-cost safety treatments more feasible for long distance rollout. And lastly, on the vehicles, as Sibylla mentioned, we've tended to have a market-based approach on that. But particularly, for example, for work vehicles.
I'm just writing this down as we speak. You've got ESP.
Once you accept that a vehicle is a workplace, a road is a workplace, and by law it is in almost all states, why do we permit employers to send someone out in a 2 or 3 star rated vehicle if a 5-star rated one is available in the same price category? Because we have now reached the point where you can get 5-star rated vehicles in virtually every category of the market. You don't have to buy a luxury vehicle. So it's not particularly a price issue. And to give credit where credit's due, there have been some examples. I believe BHP a little while ago adopted a policy that they would only permit 5-star vehicles in their mine sites. And all of a sudden, every supplier of utes to the Australian market made sure they had a 5-star vehicle. So you can get some leadership and change in the market. And it might sound a trivial point, but if you're in a 5-star vehicle, someone in a 4-star vehicle in a same crash, the person in the 4-star has about a 6% higher chance of fatality. If it's 3-star, it's about 20%. If it's 2-star, it's about 60%. So if you say, you know, how do we get our fatal crash rate down another 20 or 60 or 50%, we need to insist on things like that if we're going to get there.
Well, it's a no-brainer because I look at the largest purchaser of vehicles in this nation, the governments. And we know where the second-hand fleet's going to come from in 3 or 4 years' time, 7 years' time, 10 years' time, when the kids who are 5 and 6 and 7 now are coming out to get their licence in 10 years or 12 years' time. Look, that's very interesting. And Senator McDonald, I will give you the opportunity first. I've got a few questions.
Thanks, Senator Sterle. I won't take too long because your presentation is very comprehensive, as you would expect engineers' presentations to be. And it is, you know, everything you've said just makes so much sense to me as somebody who comes from and represents, you know, those big road networks that are, you know, still a lot of gravel, still single lane, and still don't have a lot of safety features. So, you know, I support what you're talking about. I was interested though, we had evidence from Western Australia a little while ago about tyre safety, and I wondered if that was something that you'd looked at specifically or if that was something you could comment on.
Inflation rates, Senator McDonald?
No, it was construction of tyres. There was...
quality of the tyre,
quality,
whether it's crossbuy or a steel belt and so on.
Yes, exactly. Is that something that we should be considering as a nation?
Look, in one sense, if you're serious about Vision Zero, we should consider every element of the system. So I would never say no, but in terms of highest priorities, I don't recall that coming up in our review because, generally speaking, the condition of the vehicle and tyres is only a factor in a minority of crashes. Inappropriate speed and the road condition will be two of the biggest ones. And so I suppose while we wouldn't like to ignore that one, we wouldn't say it's the highest focus. Brett, do you want to comment on that?
Right, fair enough. No, look, I don't have any additional questions, Senator Sterle. I think that's been a terrific presentation and I'm very grateful for the time you've taken to come. But as you say, same people presenting to different committees with the same recommendations and, you know, how do we move forward? So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator McDonald. Now, look, I would like to, with the time we've got remaining, I really want to focus on the heavy vehicle industry. And one of my pets, as well as I'd say every long distance driver in this nation is, WA's a little bit better, I would say that, but still a little bit way to go, but the government's stepped up to the mark and they're going to do some work there. The Queensland government's doing some work around, I'm talking heavy vehicle rest areas. The Queensland government's doing some work now to kick out all the caravanners and all that and make it just heavy vehicles. Good on Queensland. The Tassies are having an arm wrestle down there, but they've had a little bit of a win and they've consulted with the truck drivers, so congratulations there. But do the Engineers Australia, is it your role also while you're designing roads and looking at road safety, have you ever looked at I'll say this word, I can't think of another word, quality, inverted commas, heavy vehicle rest areas on our major freight routes? You done some work around that?
I'll comment on that first. Brett might have some comments too. The short answer is yes. So there are standards for that. There is a recognised standard depending on the designation of the route as to how many rest areas you should have and how far apart they should be. And I know some of the work I've done recently in South Australia with government there, it's tricky because the projects aren't public or announced yet, but I know they are looking at that and intending to spend some money on it. I guess obviously that comes back to my original point that there still depends on having an adequate budget to upgrade and maintain rural roads. So for a lot of the smaller states, from a budget point of view, that can be a challenge.
I'm going to be a bit cheeky here, Mr. Elrond, because unless I can be proved wrong, please, but my suburb down in WA, I was driving through there last week and I thought, why are we resurfacing all these roads when these are just homes, you know, what do you call it, suburban network of roads all being re-bitumenised, and I'm thinking, geez, wouldn't you love to be able to spend that money on a quality rest area or two? It's not that dear to build a rest area, surely.
How'd you put it? I guess I made that comment about the buckets of money before.
Yeah.
For all the money that's allocated to road budgets, most of it is tied to something. So the X amount of discretionary money that most engineers looking after a particular section of a state road network have is very small.
And that's the alarming part. Sorry, we talk about, we know it's speed.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, the
Our
alarming
maintenance spend
part
is too
yeah.
small. You're right, so you
Well,
could
it's
probably
not
build
in
a
the
rest area for-
psyche of the people who are handing out the money for you guys to design roads by the sounds of it.
Yeah, so the problem is the real crunch is when you set the budget, you determine what can be achieved in the scope or not. So the original allocation, if you barely have enough money to resurface the existing rural road pavement, which is essential, there's not much room for anything else.
No, but what I'm trying to allude to is, do the clients of yours who are building the road, do they factor in, if we've got to make these rural roads safe and we've got to widen them, and we're going to put, and you're making some brilliant suggestions about barriers and wire ropes and all that sort of stuff, but are they also saying, and we want heavy vehicle rest areas as part of the job as well, or
So
they
I don't
just
speak to the
ignore
ones
it?
I've worked in, but in the ones I've done recently in South Australia, yes, in every single case, they did specify it. I guess that's the submission they go up to ask for the money. Whether that's approved and they get given that money, I don't know. But in terms of the engineers asking what they recommend, it's been every single one. I've done 6 rural highways recently in South Australia, and they've had rest areas in every single one.
And that is fantastic. So it comes back to this too also. Do you know who determines where those rest areas would be and what design they are? Or does someone just give you a piece of paper and say, you've got to put it here and this is the money you got? And
Generally, that will be the engineers in the State Road Authority or the people defining the scope of the projects. It's often determined by, excuse me, what land they have available. There is sometimes a conflict where you might have, say, where there's width in the road reserve, they might need it for a stockpiling site for maintenance works, so they're reluctant to make that a rest area. It depends on what available land there is.
I suppose I know where I'm going there. And I know you don't have the answer, and that's fine, because I'd really love it if someone came out and said, sure, we talk to the truckies. We get out there and we ask them where you want it and what slant you want it and which way does it face when the sun comes up in the morning if you're in bed and the headlights on your windscreen. Anyway, that's all I was trying to allude to. So and look, on saying that, I'm sorry, I have got an eye on the clock because I have a real tight time schedule.
Just quickly on that, sorry, now
Can I just
understand your
make a
question.
couple of comments on that are similar?
Please.
Senator Sterle, you're absolutely right. Engineers have the ability to design them when they're given the opportunity. And often they're not given the opportunity because, as Scott says, the funding allocations don't allow them to do certain things. There's three levels, if you like. One is the funding has got to be made available to do things like rest areas. There's got to be the commitment at the highest levels, because it's not always engineers who are making the decisions on where the funding is going to be allocated. And then the processes have got to be put in place so that they're part of whatever is applied from the highest level down to the detail of the lowest level. Now, I've been driving around Australia for a couple of years, and I'll just say that the number of rest areas for heavy vehicles are completely inadequate. They should be, let's say, 1 hour apart, and they certainly aren't. And I'm driving a caravan, and I can't tell you the conflict that I have trying to find a place to park a caravan, not knowing whether I can park in a car bay because it might not be big enough and I might not be able to get out, or a truck bay, which might impinge on the heavy vehicle operator, which would be completely unfair. So that's just a real world example of not having good design and planning to achieve what you're saying should happen, because you're right.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Hughes, that's Mr. Brett Hughes, all you truckies listening out there. You've just won a heap of friends, because they'd all be squeezing the steering wheel at the moment saying, yeah, right, and you can imagine how they're all fired up. And look, that is so true, and I get that all the time, you know. So, and it just irks me when I think, you know, I mean, the road transport industry is taxed very handsomely. And then I think about all the projects that go around town, and then I think about how everyone loves to get photographed in a truck with a high-vis vest on, but they don't care once the truck leaves out there what's happening on the highways, let alone not only the welfare of our truckies, but also to our other road users. So, Mr. Hughes, you've gone up miles in the estimate. You might even get invited to the to big rigs to do a interview the way you're going. Can I just say thank you very much to Miss Grady, Mr. Oren, and you, Mr. Hughes. I'm sorry I have to say farewell, but I have a tight time schedule, and I do appreciate your evidence. And look, if you have a win and you say, crikey, guess what? We've just been invited to have a hug-in with all the ministers. Please let the committee know, because that would be a great outcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's great meeting you.
Say-
And I'm going
say
to wave because your
departure.
sticker says
Can I
wave
just
to
say-
a truckie.
Oh, it does. Mr. Hughes, yes, it does.
Please contact us again. Please contact us again if you've got any other questions.
Thank you kindly. This, and I'll leave you on this, this is an initiative. I think the heavy vehicle regulator might have chucked a few bob, but this is Sally Tipping from Tipping's Transport in Dubbo, and she is a major advocate for road safety, and her truckies, her and her husband treat their drivers, they are family. So good on her for doing that. The least I can do is fly that.
It's great.
Wave to a tracking
Thank
flag
you.
for her.
Nice to meet you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.